Hello collectors, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Doug and you're watching Joe Wood Collector. Today I would like to show you some very special cards I have recently added to my collection, and then talk about a very important early collector and pioneer to our hobby that you may not be aware of, and how it ties into one of my recent pickups. Please come join me as I show off some recent special pickups and learn about an early founding father of our great hobby. This is a card of Heine Groh, who I have spotlighted in one of my Glory of Their Times videos, and is now part of my new collecting project of characters from that book. This card is a dual-purpose card for me in that it is both a character from the book and represents a type card that I did not have in my collection previously. The M101-6 baseball card set consists of 108 known cards, each measuring a 4 3/8 by 6 1/2 inches. Card fronts feature full bleed images with the respective player's name and team affiliation in black lettering near the bottom of the card. The reverse is blank. All of the images were captured by Chicago publisher and sports photographer Felix Mendelssohn over a period of few years in the late 1910s, and made available exclusively via an offer in the Sporting News between 1917 and 1920. Let's take a closer look at one of our early hobby pioneers who, without their influences, we would not have the structure and framework of today's hobby. I would like to read to you excerpts from an article written by George Vrichek and published in the Sports Collector Digest. If you read about the history of sports card collecting or talk to people who have been in the hobby for a number of years, a few names are mentioned repeatedly. One of those names is Charles Buck Barker. People who knew Buck Barker would typically have a smile on their face while they start reminiscing. I never met Barker, but I am sure I would have enjoyed talking to him about sports and collecting. I thought our viewers would appreciate knowing something about the man from some of those who knew him. Unlike the situation with some of the early collectors, such as Jefferson Burdick, there are a fair number of people still around who knew Barker. He was born in 1911 and died in 1982. He was about 12 years younger than pioneer collector Burdick and John Wagner, and 8 years older than Lionel Carter and Bob Jasperson. His collecting started as an 11-year-old in 1922 and continued into the modern era. He was viewed as a thorough and dedicated researcher, baseball's biggest fan, a defacer of cardboard, or out of touch with the hobby, depending on who you talk to. Barker was always a card collector, but it took him quite a while to find there were other hobbyists out there. His name doesn't appear in the vintage hobby publication, Card Collector's Bulletin, until the mid-1950s, although he had been corresponding with collectors well before then. But once Buck he was involved prolifically. He wrote numerous articles for Card Collector's Bulletin and other hobby publications. He became the person to contact if you wanted to report an obscure set or variation. He searched out new issues through constant contact with a cadre of collectors throughout the country and overseas. Jefferson Burdick credited Barker with being responsible for most of the baseball issues added to the 1960 American Card Catalog, which was an update of the 1953 catalog. Barker, along with Carter and Wagner, were known as the baseball card boys among the early collectors. Foremost, Barker was a baseball fan, all-around dedicated collector. I reread old publications and letters from Barker and talked to several longtime collectors who shared their recollections of Buck Barker as well as the evolution of the hobby. Bill Mastro was a teenager when he first contacted Buck Barker. Bill found him to be a prolific writer who would respond to requests for help and information. He was very helpful in checklisting issues and was a major contributor to the hobby's information about baseball cards. He was also from an era that the young Bill Mastro didn't quite understand. Bill was into collecting and wanted to get it going. If he needed something, he was wanting to acquire it, and it shouldn't take forever. The pace of most of the older collectors in the 1960s moved at the speed you'd expect if you sent someone a list. They researched what you needed and what they had, and then responded with trade offers in order to avoid anyone having to pay too much for the cardboard. If you were a teenage collector, the veteran collectors all seemed like they were 100 years old, even if they were only 57 like Barker. The pricing of the cards left over from the American card catalog seemed like a good deal to the young Mastro. He phoned Barker in 1968, which was not the way collectors operated then. As many father reminded us, long-distance phone calls were reserved for major events like emergencies. Bill Mastro met with Buck Barker on many occasions and visited his home to buy cards. This was still a time when veteran collectors could conceivably complete their sets by writing to the issuers in search of high numbers or missing numbers. While Bob Salon said that Barker didn't do this as much as others, apparently Barker had pretty good contacts with Topps. In 1968, Topps issued their 12-card 3D test baseball set, an incredibly rare and expensive set today. Topps sent a few sets for a price to at least 3 collectors: Bill Nagy, Larry Frisch, and Buck Barker. Bill Mastro was hot on the trail of this test issue in 1968. He couldn't obtain a set directly from Topps, so he phoned each one of the 3 who had received the 3D sets. Nagy and Frisch would not sell their newfound sets. Barker was really interested in selling the set either. The set had just came out, and he received it in the mail. Mastro said that he would pay Barker $80 for the 12 cards, an unheard of amount by any set of new cards. Barker thought for a moment and then decided if Mastro wanted the cards that much, he could have them for $80. Following Barker's death, Lionel Carter wrote a tribute that appeared in the 1983 SCD. Carter had traded with Barker since the late 40s. Barker visited Carter starting in 1954 and stayed at Carter's home near Chicago. Barker asked Carter for some leads as to places to find cards. Carter pointed him towards a store on North Avenue in Chicago. While Carter went to work, Barker went to the recommended store and dug around all day, coming back with an incredible assortment of old cards. Carter had fellow Chicago collector Bob Wilson over as well, and they swapped cards late into the night. Carter remembered Buck Barker as a gentleman, not a braggart, someone who would sit back and listen to others rather than thrifty and not interested in paying big bucks, like 50 of them for a Wagner card. In 1983, tribute to Buck, Carter wrote, "He was what might be termed as a card collector's card collector. He was about as interested in adding to your collection as he was in adding to his own collection. Send him a want list and he'd mail back a stack of cards along with his want list and write, 'Send me some of my wants in return when you come up with some.' But I always seemed to have stacks of his duplicates on hand just waiting to become part of my collection, if only I could find some he wanted. Often it became a rather complicated deal of swapping my duplicates to other collectors for Buck's wants, so I could swap them to him. It must have been in 1954 that we first met. He paid me a visit, bringing more baseball cards in his suitcase than clothes." In 1958, Barker, Charles Bray of Pennsylvania, who was then the editor of Card Collector Bulletin, and Preston Oram of California came to Chicago, so Lionel Carter organized a meeting at his home and included Chicago area collector Bob Wilson, John Sullivan, Bob Salon, and Bill Leonard of the Chicago Tribune. In today's dollars, the group probably had at least $10 million worth of cards to choose from. They had a great time swapping cards with no money changing hands. Carter added, "It was odd that Buck and I were such good friends, as our collecting methods differed so much. I was always known as the most particular collector in the hobby. Buck liked to sort through his cards, handling them, wearing off corners, sometimes carelessly bending them. He liked to group them by team rosters in 1922 or 27 or 33, mixing and interchanging the sets to get the proper players with the proper team for that certain year. He kept his cards in dresser drawers so he could get to them at a moment's notice. The cards contesting with the socks, handkerchiefs, and underwear for space. One of the idiosyncrasies that many people will mention is that Barker wrote on his baseball cards. Lionel Carter couldn't imagine writing on a card. Bill Mastro pointed out, though, that at the time Barker collected cards, they really weren't worth that much. Nickels for the most part. Barker was delighted to find a card that he needed. In order to keep track of how he got the card, he would write the name of the source on the back of the card in very light pencil, along with the last 2 digits of the year the card was received. Mastro 68 means that this was a card Barker obtained in 1968 from Bill Mastro. Likewise, when Barker sent his cards to others, he assumed they'd like to know where the card came from. Buck Barker. Sort of like personalizing a slab card holder today. Old cards will still turn up today with Buck Barker and light pencil on the reverse. When a player was traded to another team, Barker might also resort to updating the team name on the card in pencil. I feel very fortunate that I was able to acquire this card at the Strongsville show last month. I did not have an Addy Joss represented in my collection, and I absolutely love the size and beauty of the M1012 sporting news supplements, so when I seen this piece, my interest was instantly piqued. This card was not on my want list for the show, but quickly became a thought I could no longer deny. I asked the dealer if I could take a closer look at the piece, and he asked me if I had ever heard of Charles Barker. I answered, yes. Why do you ask? He replied, look at the back of the card. I turned the slab over, and there it was in all of its glory. We were able to negotiate a deal, and I was the new proud owner of a beautiful Addy Joss piece with the Charles Barker stamp, with pencil writing from the Barker from 1957.